cons of going in May. This is a little bit longer. Weather, obviously, if I were to summarize a May start, it's going to be hot and dry all the way. You may have a little bit of snow in the Sierra. You probably won't have any snow in Southern California. You're going to cruise through Oregon. Well, I'm going to get to that in a minute, but probably mid-August. You're not going to have any snow. So you're going to have water issues. You're going to have temperature issues. You're going to have bug issues, but I get to all that. So weather-wise, think hot and dry if you're starting in May. We used to have a thing called the Annual Day Zero, PCT Kickoff, ADZ PCT KO, now affectionately remembered as the kickoff. And it was a celebratory, welcoming party held at the campground at Lake Morena, east of San Diego, 20 miles north from Campo. And it's where all the old timers or aspiring hikers would, now back in the early days, like 90s, which wasn't early days because I did the trail in 74, but that's okay. No offense taken. They would just gather around and cheer the new hikers on and give them a hamburger and a beer and celebrate and all that kind of stuff. Well, it morphed into a big affair, and what began as just a couple dozen people ended up, even as more recently as 2005, there were about 350 people in attendance. And then after the book Wild by Cheryl Strayed and the movie came out, it was pushing the thousands by the time it just got out of hand and they closed it down. The campground was pretty big and could hold a lot of people, but a lot of people were coming in. The kickoff was a wonderful thing, and it was always held the last weekend in April. So that became also kind of like the ideal start. Wasn't so early that it was cold in Southern California and wet and all that. You didn't get the snow in the Sierra, but unfortunately you got the thaw in the Sierra. So funny how that wasn't talked about when people would push that date as the ideal date to start. But we'll get into that. So the cons are weather, hot and dry. Snow, we've already talked about. You're going to have some. Remember, snow recedes up in elevation as it melts. So therefore, you may not have it on the south sides of stuff, but when you get over Forester Pass, a good deal of the northern side may all be in snow. And if that snow is soup, you're just floundering all the way down. If the north side is hard, frozen, secret season material, as in May, you glissade down thousands of feet in one whoop-de-doo slide, and you're screaming the whole way and having a ball, but not in mid-June. Mid-June, you sit on the snow and you sink in 2 feet and you ask somebody to help you up because you can't get up. We talked about post-holing, sun cups, soft snow, etc. So the third thing that's a con are the creeks, obviously. If all that snow is melting off and you got in there to the High Sierra 2 weeks into the thaw, the creeks are raging like some sort of Tolkien-esque, where the Black Riders got wasted. I can't think of the name. What was in Rivendell? On the borders of Rivendell, and all that you saw the flash flood come down the canyon. Well, it's not exactly like that, but there's some of the creeks, when they're steep enough in the Sierra, you can get a great deal of whitewater. And the Sierra canyons are largely glaciated, if not all glaciated. So you have very steep sidewalls on either side of you as you go up and over passes and down canyons and up over the next one and so forth. So a lot of the water is moving pretty fast. And so you have a lot of whitewater, which means it translates into, and we'll get into this tomorrow, but we'll talk briefly now about creek crossings. You can't see your feet. You're really you're crossing the creek by feel. And we'll talk more about that. But so the biggest danger in June, being in the Sierra, is caused by the thaw, but it is the creek crossings. Of all the years, I can only think of maybe a few people who have died because of either a fall down steep snow or a sudden fall into a creek or a lake and they couldn't get out, and so therefore died. So not many people die because of snow, but people are dying because of the creeks. So obviously a con to be in the Sierras in June. How long will the thaw last? I do think I'm getting into this, and I'll talk about this when I explain it. So I'm going to put it off for now. If you start late, another con is you better go a little faster. You don't have as much time. There is a bookend. There is a deadline to a northbound PCT through hike. Not so for southbound. Southbound has the problem with the start date. You can't get going so early, but you can run out, Christmas, New Year's, whatever. Yeah, it may get a little colder, may get a little wetter, but it's still hikeable. So therefore, this deadline, this bookend I'm talking about has to do with the first snow. When snow starts falling up in the North Cascades, it's powder snow. It's not the consolidated, the hard, packed down, refrozen stuff that you walked on, hopefully, in the Sierra. Because you were talking now May starts, so mid-June entries, you're really not going to have a whole lot of freeze thaw going on. So unless you get up really early, and I'm cheating now and telling you about something I'm going to tell you tomorrow, but one of the tricks to solving the soft snow hiking problems and the post-holing and the wallowing is to do your hiking before it gets to that magical post-holing hour mid-morning. So you're getting up at 3 in the morning and getting off at 4 by headlamp and utilizing what amount of cold temperatures you had, maybe above freezing, but nevertheless cold, to make the snow hard enough to support your weight. And that's how you get by being in the Sierra so late, like during the thaw, and still be able to avoid post-holing and wallowing. But when it starts snowing powder, when fresh snow starts falling, you can't walk on it. And you might say, well, Ned, listen, I'm going to bring these fancy new shebangs called snowshoes, and they're going to save the day. Well, these damn things don't have enough flotation. I mean, even this one, these are great, MSR Lightning Ascents, nice because they have all the teeth and they don't have tubular frames, and we'll talk about all that junk tomorrow. These things turn into skis if they have tubular frames, and you don't want that. But anyway, if you don't have a big enough snowshoe and you got a lot of body weight plus the pack and stuff, powder snow doesn't really hold your weight. So even if you have 100 yards, I have watched people go zooming by no, you don't zoom. They only zoomed because they were walking in my tracks. They go zooming up to my campsite in our winter training classes. And we talk and they say, okay, we're going to disappear, and they take off. And they hit the bank of snow because around the tents, everything's packed down. And then they start lifting their knees to their chests, and they got their snowshoes. And every time they pick their snowshoes up, it's got like a 8-inch, 10 inches of powder snow, which is water. Remember, it's got water weight. So therefore, muscles fatigue really fast. And the 100 yards it took most people to get to this tree that I can remember real fondly, it took them like an hour and a half. 100 yards. It was actually less than a football field. I would have said more like 70, 60 yards. Took them like an hour and a half, hour and a quarter. I was timing it because I thought, man, these guys are going to turn around. And they did. But they had to realize that. So when the snow starts falling in the North Cascades, you may not find the trail thereafter. Maybe even if it only dumps 10 inches, yeah, you'll see the trail. But if it decides to dump what it did a few years ago, where 30 PCT through hikers got caught unawares, left from Stevens Pass, started heading north. It was the 28th of September, I want to say 2014 or 16, and they got 12 feet of snow. Lots of SAR responses, lots of SAR callouts. It wasn't pretty. Some people that year, I believe, actually were never found. I can think of one Sherpa, but I'm not sure if Sherpa's demise was that year or not. They still have not found him. There were some horror stories of survival. You do not want to be up in the North Cascades because it's so damn steep and you're following ridges and stuff when there's powder snow on the ground. Consolidated snow, hard, refrozen, that's a whole nother story. But once the powder starts dumping and you can't see the trail and you're wallowing through this frozen water and you're getting wet and cold and all your gear is getting wet and cold, not good. The last thing you want to be is so close to this dream goal of Canada, and now you can't go any further. Hopefully you'll get out. So that deadline, according to the rangers at Manning Provincial Park, just across the border in Canada, is mid-September. Historically, that's roughly when these big powder snowstorms start coming in. So plan to be off the trail so you don't get stuck like that, maybe even killed like that, buried under snow. Be off the trail by mid-September. So you start in May. Now you're going May 1st to mid-September, do the math. You're going to have to move a little faster. You're going to have less zeros or longer days. Now, these folks who start late after, say, the 20th or 25th of April, they're the ones that you see getting up really early in the morning and taking off and doing their 25s and 30s because they're bucking time. Of course, they're also going into town every 4 or 5 days or 7 days and having the pizza and beer and the parties and spending money and wasting time and probably spending too many nights in hotels, and they're not watching the calendar so that when they do hit the trail again, they've got to go even faster. This becomes one of the issues that cause such a high dropout rate from PCT completion. It's still at 70, 75%. It's not really failure rate, but completion rate's about 25, 30%. There are a number of reasons why people are unable to finish. And that goes beyond the breadth of our conversation here. But just remember, aim for middle of September. If it looks like by the time you get there, and I see the time, Carol, so I'm watching. By the time you get to the North Cascades, Snoqualmie Pass North, you will, especially if you're up there in late September, because Washington, yeah, you may run into mid-October, you're going to feel it in the air. You're going to feel the seasons change. You know that winter is coming on. And then people will start telling you, and radio weather forecasts will start telling you that stuff's coming in. Try and be off the trail by mid-September. So that means you got to go a little faster, maybe a few less zeros. So that was the 4th con of about 9. The next one is your time frame. Okay, we already talked about that. It's shorter. You have less time to make mistakes, less time to loiter. You also have less time to retool. Say you're not all that prepared, but you're starting late. A lot of people rely upon the fact that in Southern California, they can hitchhike into the nearest REI or something like that. They can retool. They can figure out, man, my sleeping bag is just too hot, whatever. They got to go get another one. This all burns time and money and expense. I already said that, but so you have, by starting late, you have less time to do that. The 5th, that was the 5th. The 6th thing, if you start late, you have a problem with wildfires. As we've seen the last few years with 2 drought winters in a row, this could be a 3rd, you never know. Wildfires are a problem. If you're caught out on trail late in the summer, could be a thing that sends you home. Bugs. Everybody asks about the bugs. When are the bugs bad? Where are the bugs bad? You're going to have bugs bad. Whenever you have standing water from snowmelt, the mosquitoes love to breed in it. So all your little puddles in the forest and all your standing water in these tarns and little pond-like things that have no inflow or outflow, those are perfect breeding grounds. You go up and you pump your water out of the thing and you see all these little wiggly guys in the water. All those little mosquitoes are trying to grow. Well, you're going to be going through the bug season, just prime bug time. And I'm going to get into that here in a second because I'm almost done with the cons, and then I'm going to start explaining things, and I'll try and go through that quick, Carol. So bugs are bad. You'll also have less natural water supplies. Southern California can be cooking. It can be so bad people have died from hyperthermia, dehydration in Southern California. So you have less natural water. The little bits of water that might be flowing could be completely dried up. So now you're more reliant upon trail angel caches of water, which may or may not be there because you're not the only ones using them. A lot of the people who cross the border illegally use those water supplies. And sometimes there may not be any, especially if you're starting late. Also, the trail angels that cache that water may say stop after the herd kind of starts dwindling, and that's right around the beginning of May. Logistically, actually, there is a con. I said earlier, the logistics are easier by starting later to a point. It's good initially because all the resorts are open. But say after Labor Day, the resorts start closing. Your ability to resupply food in the trailhead general store may not be possible. All right, so that's it for the pros and cons. Let's get into some of the details because I need to explain a couple things. We've gone an hour. I don't know if Carol's still there, but if she wants me to stop, I can. But I think I'm good for a half an hour. We can roll over so I can take more of your questions. Let's talk about this thing called strategy. There is a strategy that affects when you start. Maybe you can't start early because of school. Maybe you can't start early because of your job. There's certain things that are going to affect when you start. But there are advantages and disadvantages, as we've already been talking about, that have to do with the environment and things like logistics. Now, when you start in May, you're going to be doing, it's basically a month. Here, I'll map it out real quick for you. Normally, because you got your fast hikers and you got your slow hikers and you got your party hikers and you got all kinds of different campers and speed people. The normal average, you do Southern California in a month, you do the Sierras in a month, you do Northern California in a month, you do Oregon in a month, you do Washington in a month. That's 5 months, I think, something like that, 5.5, something like that. I can't remember. Usually people do Southern California in 4 to 6 weeks. Let's just say, look at the 1st of May. You're not going to get to Kennedy Meadows South till June 15th. You're not going to get to Tahoe or through the Sierra till July 15th. It's very typical for PCT through hikers to be involved in the 4th of July parade in Lone Pine or Independence. They're still plowing through the Sierra, those guys who start late. It's very normal for PCT through hikers to be in South Lake Tahoe July 4th also. So the Sierras will stretch you guys and spread you guys out, but it's not uncommon to see a whole herd of through hikers descend on the casino, what do you call it? A smorgasbords, you know, where you pay one fee, like $35 or $25 or something. You can eat all you want, all that sort of thing. Well, the casinos have gotten a little wiser to that, and they see you coming and maybe smell you coming, and they may have a thing to say about how much you can eat, because you guys can eat them out, and then they don't make any money and they don't like that. But anyway, so July 15th in Tahoe means Oregon a month later, August 15th, means Washington a month later, September 15th. Oh shit, you're crossing the Bridge of the Gods, entering Washington September 15th, hiking at a normal pace of, say, 17 miles a day. See how come these guys got to go fast? They're fighting the clock. They started late, but that's okay. That's okay. It works. It works for your personal schedules and stuff. Remember though, once you get out of the snow, what snow you have in the Sierra, you're going to be pretty much clear sailing. Once you hit Sonora Pass, Sonora Pass really is kind of a landmark. But from there on north, you get onto ridges again. You get out of the north, you get out of the washboard of northern Yosemite, where you're in canyons and out of canyons and that sort of thing. And the creek crossings are god awful. They're very dangerous, north of Tuolumne Meadows until Sonora Pass. But once you get to Sonora Pass, you're up on the ridges and you're dropping in elevation. You don't really get out of the northern Sierra till Donner Summit. And then you start dropping into Northern California. Then it gets dry and hot again. Once you get to Oregon, clear sailing. Oregon is kind of flat-ish. You've got some volcanoes to walk over the flanks of. And Washington, Southern Washington isn't all that bad. But once you get about a third of the way up Washington, things start getting steeper and rougher. And but then, man, you're into October, maybe late September. You're really pushing it. You're watching the clouds. You're getting a feel for the weather. That's why these guys got to go fast. So that's kind of the strategy of timing. Yeah, I got to start May because I couldn't get a permit earlier. Now what do I have to deal with? That's why we're here tonight. The environment we've already talked about. So that's the strategy side. So let's explain the environment side, which we largely have. So I'm gonna blow through this pretty quick. Southern California is gonna be hot and dry. That's a given. Fewer water sources. You're going to have more abundant pests. You're going to have more snakes and spiders and scorpions and junk like that the later you start. You're also going to have a chance for wildfires. Maybe, yeah, Southern California gets them, you know, and then all the way throughout the rest of your trip. So starting late isn't so cool for wildfires. We pretty much killed the Sierra with its sun cups, its raging creeks. I want to add one caveat because you guys are going to be in the Sierra during the thaw. We're going to talk about this tomorrow, how to cross creeks. and how to deal with the snow and all the technique involved. But just remember, takeaway expression, you do not need to cross the creek where the summer trail does. Look at your map. There's an acronym, the word stop. Stop, think, observe, plan. Stand beside that creek and look at it. Assess whether you can or you cannot cross there. If you don't feel comfortable about it, you can wait till morning. The flow rate will be down because there'll be less melt overnight. So it may drop a foot, the creek. So maybe with a foot of less push against your body, be a lot safer crossing where the summer trail does. Or you could say, forget it, it's late in the afternoon. I got to get strategically, see, there's a strategy for your trip and there's a strategy for your day. Strategically, you want to be up as high as you can in the canyon and still avoid getting fried by lightning, because late in the summer or late in the spring, you're going to have more thunder and lightning where you want to camp in dense trees. But the idea is to camp as high up the valley as you can. So you may say, forget crossing the creek at the summer trail, go upstream or downstream. And we'll talk about this tomorrow, but I just wanted to get it straight in your head that the two gals who died crossing the Kings River right before Mather Pass, between Mather and Pinchot Pass, they were short and slight of body and low in weight, and they couldn't resist the amount of water pushing against their bodies and got swept off their feet and drowned because they were there in the afternoon. Big creek, it's actually called a river, don't want to be there in the afternoon. Cross those suckers in the mornings. If you have to, camp out right next to it and cross it in the morning. So we've talked about how creeks volumes rise in the day and go down at night. And actually, you've got another problem with being there during the thaw, is that with all the snow melting everywhere, you know this, trails go across slopes, right? You're descending a canyon, you're following the creek is on one side of you. So the water is going to melt above you, come down the canyon wall, hit the trail, and then run down the trail. So your trails turn into little creeks. Therefore, your feet are constantly wet. Whether you're crossing creeks in your trail runners or not, your feet are always wet. So you've got a problem with trench foot. You've really got to find a way to dry out your feet, or else you're going to have an infection problem that'll take you home. So that's another problem which was not listed in the cons, but we just covered now. Let's go on to the duration of the thaw. After a drought winter, there's not a whole lot of snow in the Sierra. So therefore, it's not going to take that long for it to melt off. When I say melt off, it doesn't mean it's like, okay, suddenly poof, it's gone. Like I said, it recedes and just means there's less of it, and where you have it is at the steepest places toward the tops of passes where it's really kind of iffy, but if there's a boot track, you're cool. So after a drought winter with less snow, your thaw may only last 4 weeks. So if the thaw starts after a drought winter, it could start May 1st. Your thaw could be over by June 1st. So this is why Ray Jardine got the whole thing, man. Let's just zoom through the Sierras, starting mid-June, golden, dry trail everywhere, making the miles, knock this thing out, move on to rowing around the world or whatever he did next. After a normal winter, your thaws may start, like I said, the end of May and last 6 to 8 weeks, not 4, but 6 to 8. That's why most John Muir Trail through hikers, we call them section hikers, don't really think that it's safe to be in there until July 4th. So that would be 5 weeks later. So after a normal winter, the thaw is not going away for a couple months. So your high creek crossings and high volume creeks are going to be around for a while. So when you hear people say, I'm going to sit at Kennedy Meadows and wait for the snow to melt. Wrong. There's a lot of snow up there, and it may take a month, 2 months. If it's a heavy winter, it could take all summer, and then it may still be around in October. Granted, only up high, but you can slip and fall up high and crash into that next boulder and be flown out of there. So that's kind of how it goes for the duration of the thaw. And kind of put that in the back of your head when you hear people say, I'm just going to wait for the snow to melt, because it doesn't help. Just do it. And preferably, if you're going to just do it while it's frozen and not when you guys with a May start are going to be doing it. If anything, I would advocate you May starters to go start at start at Kennedy Meadows. Yeah, you're going to be a little bit out of shape, but those first 4 days up to Cottonwood Pass will do something to get you in shape. I've done it every year for 40 years because my first trips were always out of Kennedy Meadows. Yeah, Carol's nodding her head. Remember, 1 mile an hour on snow. You're going to have days, if everything's on snow, you're going to have days where you're doing 8 to 12 miles a day. But who cares? You started early, go slow. The Sierra is one of 2 of your greatest memories of the whole trail. The North Cascades and the Sierra are the 2 places most thru hikers say were their favorite places later when questioned. So why go through it fast? I've met countless thru hikers who said, yeah, I went through it fast, but now I know where to come back to. And it's like, really? Why didn't you go through it slow? But see, just like you guys starting in May, maybe some of you couldn't, but you could change your schedule around, start at Kennedy Meadows, take advantage of the month of the secret season. If we have a normal winter, walking on hard packed snow, swinging your feet, piece of cake, put your crampons on if you need to, carry your whippet, or an ice axe if you know when to stop or if you're willing to stop. That's the problem. We'll talk about all that stuff tomorrow. But anyway, so that's duration. That's thaw duration. I'm not going to overview this because we've already killed it. I think you've already got, an idea on creek crossings, post holings in the Sierras. Southern California, we've talked about. Northern California, we talked about. Oregon and Washington, you're going to be getting there, like I said, late. So you're going to still have bugs. You're still going to have fog. You're going to have rain. One of the problems in the Cascades is the issue of fog, in the sense also that it's like a little rainforest up there. And you're used to the Sierra perhaps in Northern California where you've got 18 inches of trail or 24 inches of trail, and that's all, it doesn't have branches hanging over it, and hopefully the trail crew has come through and probably hasn't, and you can be climbing over trees and jumping like that. But when the bushes, when it's so wet in Oregon and Washington, the bushes actually encroach on the trail, and now you're kicking your way through bushes that are soaking wet from fog, if not rain, because it rains up there a lot. So have something to keep your legs and lower body dry.